And we are back. We are headed into what is this week 9? I think at this point, after about let's call it 5 weeks, it all just blurs together to me. This is just the week before the last week, before the previous week. So whatever week we're headed into, I believe it is week 9. Interesting slate of games. How did last week treat you, Brady? And is there anything you're looking forward to this week as it pertains to we had some interesting like Dalvin Cook was a great and almost seemingly obvious pivot. There was the Chiefs were just obvious in general and ended up coming in lower owned. There were some interesting happenings last week, I think, if you're playing in tournaments that you should be taking notes on. Did you find anything interesting about last week, and how'd you do?
Yeah, it was a crazy week last week. It seemed like pretty much all of the chalk busted. I had a really poor cash lineup, but it still cashed. It had Jimmy G in it. Luckily, Jimmy G was 92% owned. And what saved me was DK Metcalf and Dalvin Cook both in single entry. And I'll tell you what, if Jimmy G and Kittle did not get hurt, I would have had a massive week. So just very unlucky there, but was still able to cash with two of the really big injuries there. So hopefully get some better luck this week and ready for this week. It should be fun.
Yeah, it should be a good one. Let's hop into it. Let me see what we got. Our first game, technically the first game on the entire week is Green Bay, San Francisco. I'm not sure how much of that game we see, so not playing the Thursday, Monday slate anyways. Let's hop into the first game I have on my list. It is Tennessee versus Chicago. Tennessee, 5.5-point favorites, a 46.5-point total. So this game, I don't expect to see a ton of successful passing. Chicago passes at one of the highest rates in the league, but they're not particularly good at it. And Tennessee is one of the more run-dominant teams in the NFL, and they are quite good at it. I would say my biggest note on this game is we might finally see tempered ownership on Derrick Henry. And I come on this show and pretty much say that Derrick Henry is a fragile play, and if he's high-owned, you just fade him every week. I don't think that's going to be the case this week, so I actually might get onto some Derrick Henry. And then I don't think I'm really stacking either side. So I'd probably just look to run it back with a one-off of, Derrick Henry plus Darnell Mooney, Derrick Henry plus Allen Robinson. Not awfully interested in Anthony Miller. He's been so, I don't know if it's underutilized. He's just been outplayed by Darnell Mooney. So what do you make of these two teams? Do you have any interest in stacking, or is it more of a one-off? Or not at all, if that's your preference.
Yeah, it's probably either a one-off or a none at all, and that's a really interesting take you have there with Henry. He is going to be lower owned. We have McCaffrey coming back. We have the other running backs that are going to gain some ownership. Dalvin Cook's going to have a massive amount of ownership, so I can definitely see going there with some lower ownership on Henry. Definitely makes sense. Chicago's defense is pretty tough, but I'm not scared to go there and play Henry. So I'll definitely have a little bit of Henry. Other than that, you mentioned him, Mooney at 3,900. I think is a good value play. I kind of find it hard to pay up for Allen Robinson, 6,900. He's a fantastic wide receiver, but just Nick Foles is really bad. So kind of hard to go there, especially with all the great plays at wide receiver this week I'm liking. Other than that, Jonnu Smith is interesting, 3,900, very cheap price tight end. And we'll kind of talk about it as the slate goes on here, but there's a bunch of value at tight end. I'm definitely paying down. Jonnu Smith might be that guy. Hasn't been doing all that great, but still the past 3 weeks, no touchdowns. He still has 5 touchdowns on the year. He's bound to find the end zone, sooner or later. He gets targeted there a ton. So Jonnu Smith, 3,900 is something I'm looking at, but honestly, not the most interest in this game as a whole.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think Derrick Henry's interesting, but I wouldn't go absurd on him, and neither of these quarterbacks. Ryan Tannehill's not bad. His team is just set up in a way that they do not want to use him unless it's absolutely necessary. So next game, I don't think there's been any update on the situation of Minnesota versus Detroit. Matt Stafford got put on the COVID list, but he could, I believe, be taken off. He was a high risk close contact. You can be taken off that list. I believe this is what Tom Pelissero tweeted out, that if you are basically clear for 5 days, you can be 5 days after the contact specifically happened. You can be taken off the list. So it will depend on when his contact happened, if he can play or not. I don't think we're going to see him. I'm not missing any updates on that, am I?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anything else. I've been looking around. I didn't see anything. So, assuming we see, I would imagine David Blau. I know he's currently listed as the backup, I believe. I have almost no interest in the Lions at that point. They basically become not much better than the Andy Dalton Cowboys or whatever. Maybe a little better than the Ben DiNucci Cowboys. But on the other side, at that point, it also becomes difficult because Minnesota, when they have a lead, is one of the most run-heavy teams in the NFL. Even when they don't have a lead, they're still a run-heavy team. So, I don't know. At this point, because I think this is a game that I don't have much interest in, it's a lot of Dalvin Cook and not much else.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I mean, yeah, Stafford not playing kind of ruins my plans coming into the week. I was looking at targeting this Minnesota defense, who is absolutely awful against the pass here. I don't know. I mean, if Blau is going to be the starter at 4,000, I mean, it makes it kind of interesting for a couple of reasons. It seems like this week everybody's going to pay up at quarterback. I think maybe paying down at 4,000 could be a little interesting. I know it's very dangerous, but this is the Minnesota defense. I mean, get a couple touchdowns, you're able to go up and get your Dalvin Cooks, your Christian McCaffreys, your other good expensive plays on there. So I might make a couple lineups with that. The stacking options, Marvin Jones, Amendola, Hawkinson are all great. And then a run back of probably just Dalvin Cook for me. So I might make a couple lineups with the 4,000 price tag of Blau. If he is the starter, but I'm not sure yet. We still have a couple days to get some more news out.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, this is a Wednesday show. It is simply a wait and see. But you will be on Sunday morning, so you will have an update for the viewers then, so everybody can check us out at the same place you're watching now, I assume, on Sunday morning. So that will be just a simple information wait and see. The next game we have is Washington versus the New York Giants. Another game. We'll get in some good games. I promise. Good games are coming. I don't know. This doesn't seem like it's one of them though. 41-point total. Washington, 2.5-point favorites. We did see the last time, I believe they just came off by. The last time we saw Washington, Antonio Gibson, 20 carries in that, I think it was the blowout win over Dallas. They're projected to win by a little less than a field goal, not necessarily a blowout, but should still be a somewhat stable lead over the Giants. Daniel Jones doesn't look very good, and Washington has a great pass rush. So, one, that puts not only the Washington defense in play, but even anytime you can face Kyle Allen, who's taken multiple sacks in all three of his starts, didn't even finish one of those games, and has 2 turnovers in the 3 starts. I think the Giants defense could be like maybe a little contrarian leverage play off like some popularity of Washington defense, but outside of that, I mean, you can get to one-offs of like Evan Ingram, one-offs of Sterling Shepard. I don't think we're going to see Golden Tate this week. Potentially some disciplinary things I have to double check. It doesn't hardly matter to me, though, because these two teams have so incredibly low implied team totals. I mean, Washington is a favorite, still has an under 22 implied team total, and that has dropped. It opened just above 22. So this game is one that I think we will get to better games soon. This isn't really a game I'm targeting much at all.
No, what I'm going to be targeting is probably just the defenses here. The Washington football team at 3,400 is very interesting. Going against this Giants offense that does not look great at all. So that's probably where I'm going to go. Like you mentioned, the Giants defense is something else that could be fine. It's like the second lowest or the lowest point total, throughout all the slates. So just defenses for me, and that's probably about it. I think Evan Ingram at 4,300 could be interesting, but other than that, this is a stay away from me.
Yeah, so we have a game next that I promise is finally a good one. It's Jacksonville versus Houston. Houston, a touchdown favorite, a 50-point total. Came down a point since opening, but we're still looking at 50 points projected to be scored in this game. I mean, I have a lot of interest in this game. I do think so. We're going to presumably see, I believe this was announced earlier in the week, Jake Luton or Luton. I don't know. He's an Oregon State quarterback, was like modestly efficient. Didn't have a ton of accolades coming out, and obviously wasn't highly drafted, so not sure what we can expect from him, but he's not expensive. And, the Houston defense isn't very good. I'm not too excited about the Jacksonville side. I am excited about the Houston side. Jacksonville allowing the most yards per attempt on a per game basis, or a per pass basis, I guess, in the entire NFL out of all 32 defenses. And we've seen Deshaun Watson kind of come alive with like 4 consecutive 300-yard games, I believe 5 consecutive multi-passing touchdown games. He's really come alive after a difficult start, which I know included facing off against both like Baltimore and Kansas City. So maybe it shouldn't be surprising that the immense turnaround we're seeing. He projects to be somewhat popular, but his pass-catching options don't seem to be quite garnering the same level of ownership. There are a lot of good pass-catching options, and Will Fuller falls in a range of that high 7K to low 6K to low 7K range, where there are a lot of good options in there. I understand why he wouldn't be particularly popular among them. I get why you'd go to like a Tyler Lockett over him. But given the low ownership, the very easy correlation play, and the great matchup, I think like a very obvious Fuller, Cooks, Deshaun Watson stack, like it's not going to be too highly owned. You don't have to get super weird with it. Do you have interest in stacking the Texans, and who would you run it back with?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, actually. Deshaun Watson, I love him this week. And, we touched on it earlier in the year. Like, he had some really tough matchups to start off the year. Kansas City, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. After that, he's been absolutely fantastic. And another great matchup here against Jacksonville. So you're right. Deshaun Watson, Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks. I love it. And Brandon Cooks, somebody I really like, 5,500. 9 targets week 7, 9 targets week 6, 12 targets week 5. He's finally getting it together. Someone else who started out the season slow, but he's been getting pounded with targets ever since then. So Brandon Cooks at 5,500. I believe he even has more targets in the last 3 weeks than a Will Fuller. So I do like that stack there. And really, to run it back, the only option I'm really looking at is Robinson here at 7,000. Someone that's going to get a lot of opportunity, 22 carries in week 7. He also had 6 targets, 4 receptions. He can catch the ball as well. He looks like he has multiple catches in each and every game this season here. So 6 touchdowns on the year as well. I think he can possibly get in the end zone here against this Houston defense that is not great. So probably for me, Watson, Fuller, Cooks, run it back with Robinson. I think David Johnson at 5,600 is a cheap play against this Jacksonville defense, but I'm definitely looking at a double stack there and run it back.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both kind of laid this out quite perfectly. I set you up and you teed it right back with James Robinson. And I only say that because I don't know how much production we can expect from this Lutton-led offense. And not only that, but they haven't had great, no receiver has really separated themselves. It's been 1 week Keelan Cole, the next LaVisca, the next DJ Chark. You could go with any of those guys. I don't think any of them are bad plays. Maybe Keelan Cole's a little bit too far of a stretch, but I think you just bank in so much production with a guy like James Robinson. We saw it, I believe it was last week, where it was necessary for James Robinson to have a good game, not only for Jacksonville to stay in it, but for the opposing team. I think it was last week, which was maybe it was 2 weeks ago at this point. Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. It was Justin Herbert versus Justin Herbert and the Chargers. And the reason Justin Herbert had such an incredible game is because his team didn't actually get to have this massive lead throughout the game, despite being big favorites and probably rightfully so over Jacksonville, because James Robinson scored twice. I think that is the perfect scenario that sets up Deshaun Watson to smash the 300-yard bonus again. All things considered, you want your opponents to probably have a positive game script, especially if that doesn't preclude you from also scoring points. When the Ravens have a positive game script, it's probably because they stop your offense. The same with the Pittsburgh or potentially even Kansas City. Really good defense there. When they have a positive game script, it could be because they shut your offense down. More likely, Jacksonville just runs hot and scores touchdowns well. They're probably not shutting any opposing quarterbacks down. So I like the Robinson run back. I think it makes a lot of sense in the way it correlates with Deshaun Watson. I think we can move on to Baltimore, as I just talked about. Baltimore, 2.5-point favorites over Indianapolis. This total is on the rise, which is kind of the only reason I would have some interest in it, is if the betting market, which is largely a fairly efficient market, thinks that this game could be a sneaky shootout or a pseudo shootout spot. I mean, I don't know how many times I'm going to keep going back to the well. What do we make of Lamar Jackson? Just every other week has a bad week, and the weeks that he doesn't have bad weeks, he hasn't broken the slate. That's kind of why you go to a Lamar Jackson, is because he can break the slate, or I thought he could break the slate, and he hasn't done it. Why hasn't he done it?
I don't know, and it's really frustrating, especially for someone that owns him in season long. I drafted him in the second round early there, so wish he would start to get together. I mean, I do think he has some upside here against the Colts, which is a really good defense. I'll say one thing: I do think Lamar Jackson's going to be low owned. He was pretty low owned last week against this Colts defense. It's definitely going to scare everybody away, and it's also going to scare everybody away because he hasn't been all that great this year, only averaging 21.5 DraftKings points. Everybody was expecting, a lot more than that. I guess I have some interest because he's 6,900, and it's really crazy seeing him at 6,900. He does have a rushing yard upside, multiple touchdown upside. This isn't the greatest game. I think it's one of the lowest totals on the slate here. But if you want to get really different, maybe a Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews stack. And speaking of Mark Andrews, he's priced down to 4,800. So really cheap prices here. I think you can get different. I do think there's upside. I do think it'll be low owned. Other than that, for the Colts side, really hard finding a run back option. I'm not overly high on a Phillip Rivers there. I don't really see the Colts doing much in this game, honestly.
Yeah, on the Colts side, I agree. I'm not sure if we see T.Y. Hilton. I think he was held out of practice today, which is Wednesday, so it doesn't look great. And he was ruled out in that game. It wasn't like he was potential to return. They pretty quickly, I believe, ruled him out. So I don't know if we'll see him. Maybe that gives you some value on a Pascal or a Johnson. But frankly, I just think it continues to mean that this offense isn't awfully exciting, and the backfield is just kind of a mess with Jonathan Taylor getting out-carried and out-produced. He got out-produced by both Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins and got out-carried. It was 20 to 10 or 11, I believe, maybe 12, low double digits. So it doesn't seem like we're getting much of a role from him. On the other side, yeah, I have to have some interest. I think there's probably still, we know there's still the rushing upside with Lamar Jackson, and he's thrown at an above average rate in terms of touchdowns the entire year. It's just been, he hasn't been able to really put it all together in one game. He 2 weeks ago, he had over 100 yards on the ground. There is still that upside. I just think it comes much more infrequently now, because last season his like touchdown rate was just incredibly unsustainable, and his like rate of hitting deep balls was just unreal. And you just can't sustain those things even if you are in like an incredibly good passer. So and maybe he's not the best passer. I still think he's probably decent though. So I do think there's that upside there. Now you just can't bank in the greatest floor, but I'm not looking for a floor in my tournament lineups, and I'm probably not getting to him in cash anyway. So I think he's still a fine tournament play. I don't think he is a week in, like week out, jam him in as a top 2 quarterback, a top 3 quarterback like he was last year. But if he's going to be cheaper and still lower owned in tournaments, yeah, probably just, we just roll these dice again. And if they come up, double sixes at some point, I'll probably make a lot of money. So let's move into our next game. Kansas City. Oh my God. Kansas City, 10.5 point favorites versus Carolina. A rising 53 point total, which is quite nice on the context of this slate. Last week, we saw not only did Mahomes, Tyreek, like DeMarcus Robinson, Travis Kelce, all just had great games. I believe it was the Kelce Robinson Mahomes stack won the Millie Maker, but they had great games on top of the fact that no other quarterback came within 10 points of Patrick Mahomes, and no other tight end came within, I think it was like 12 or 11 points of Travis Kelce. They are incredibly expensive to stack, but they do give you a distinct advantage over the field in that they have like just an incredible point total. When you're getting potentially like you're projected to be over 4 touchdowns in a game at 32 implied team total. I gotta say, it's difficult not to get to these guys, and then you build a lineup with them, and it is difficult to get to anyone else. How do you approach a team like this that is so good and quite expensive?
Yeah, I'm with you. And I was actually messing around with the stack because the Chiefs stack was the key to the $1 million last week. And you're right; these guys are so expensive. It's so hard to double stack with like a Hill or a Kelce. I mean, you can go down and get Robinson, but still, it's really hard, especially with so many great plays on the slate. I'm probably not going to go there. I think it's way too hard to stack these guys. There's other plays I like at running back that I want to pay up for, like a Dalvin Cook or a Christian McCaffrey. There's other guys at wide receiver I really like a Stephon Diggs, who we'll talk about. So I'm personally probably not going to go there. I don't hate it. On the other side of things, Carolina, McCaffrey's coming back this week. It's going to be really interesting. I'm curious to hear what the ownership is projected to be here for a guy like Christian McCaffrey, who it's kind of crazy seeing him here at 8,500. I mean, I believe he started out the year like 10,000, something like that. He started out the year at 10,000 salary. So I think this is the cheapest we are going to see Christian McCaffrey for the rest of the year. It's just, is he going to have a full role? Is he going to come out there and split carries with Mike Davis? I think even if he splits a little bit, I still think there's going to be a ton of upside for Christian McCaffrey here in a game that's actually projected to score high. So McCaffrey at 8,500, I think he'll be way lower owned than a Dalvin Cook this week. So a lot to see here, but I like McCaffrey a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I can only pray that Christian McCaffrey at 8,500, when he opened the season at 10,000, when he closed last season on one of the greatest runs of fantasy production in the history of fantasy football. Right now, I'm looking at ownership projection just under 10%. I will play a lot of him and run him back with the likes of Tyreek Hills and Travis Kelce's and even DeMarcus Robinson's if he is, Christian McCaffrey at 8,500 at less than 10% ownership. That would just be a jam spot. I find it hard, but maybe I'm just overestimating the public. I find it hard to believe that people won't just see Christian McCaffrey at 8,500 and absolutely light up and jam him in. I'm not sure what I make of this yet. I think, ownership can change throughout the week. It would be difficult in my mind for that to happen, but who am I to say like these ownership projections are generally fairly accurate? I don't know what to make of this situation. It's essentially an unheralded situation because we haven't ever had a Christian McCaffrey known quantity come in at 8,500 since we knew how good he was. He's always been that much. So if I do at the end of the week believe that he will be 8,500 and 10% owned, I'm probably jamming him at 30 or 40%, frankly. If I think he gets up to 20 or 25%, which is what I think a more efficient ownership would be of him, then I'm probably looking at maybe some Teddy Bridgewater stacks. Teddy Bridgewater has been fairly accurate this year, hasn't been, going crazy deep or anything, which is not his MO. But the thing is, you don't have to go deep a ton. You don't have to make these giant splash plays when you have 2 receivers who get all of the work. When you say throw for 280 if you're Teddy Bridgewater. So much of that production is soaked up by 2 specific players. And this has been in the context of not having McCaffrey, but for a long time, Mike Davis was producing very similar. So you do have a stand-in for McCaffrey in most of those games. His last few games weren't as good. I mean, we've seen over 50% of the targets and nearly 80% of the air yards go to two players, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. So when you stack Teddy Bridgewater, you know, almost certainly. I know we've seen like 2 Curtis Samuel pass catching touchdowns, I believe. I know he has a rushing touchdown. For the most part, you're not going to lose touchdowns to an Ian Thomas or whatever, or Seth Roberts, who isn't even on the team anymore. I don't even know who their third receiver is. That should tell you all you need to know. Like, I could name you like the top 5 skill position players or the receivers on every team. I can't even name you. I think Keith Kirkwood's on IR, so it wouldn't even be him. No one. They have no one. It's 2 guys, and that's it. So when you stack Teddy Bridgewater, you know you are getting the right plays because there aren't wrong plays when Teddy goes off. Do you have any interest in stacking them against a difficult Chiefs matchup, but also in a great game environment in which they should be trailing, in which there should be a ton of points? Any interest in a Teddy Bridgewater stack?
No, I agree. That definitely makes sense, especially because of how cheap that stack would be on the Carolina side. Bridgewater only 6,000. DJ Moore is somebody who's 5,600. Robbie Anderson 6,300. And on the Chiefs side, you have tons of run back options. So yeah, I definitely agree there. Definitely something I'm gonna have to look at there. So gonna keep track of the ownership of McCaffrey. And you made a good point. If he gets too high owned, that's definitely a way to get different there.
Yeah, I think if he does get high on, which I have no clue if that's going to happen at this point, it would be a really interesting leverage play to go with, not only to get like leverage off of like the probably popular-ish Mahomes, but you'd still tap into the game. You just wouldn't have to pay nearly as much, and you still have that kind of upside, essentially. You still tap into the game environment. Obviously, a lot of the scoring is projected to go towards the Chiefs, but all things considered, it's not a bad thing to have your opponent score a lot of points because it forces you to pass, play fast, and attempt to score points as well. And like you said, the run back options are incredible, and you can afford the run back options because your initial stack is so cheap. So I will probably, at the end of the day, have a lot of Teddy Bridgewater. Our next game, one side, very fun for offense, Atlanta. The other, Denver, not so much, although they did play quite well against the Chargers in another hilarious Chargers collapse. What do you make of this game? It's got a 50-point total that is up 2.5 points since opening. Really, like, the Falcons are always a good team to play. Do you play them given that the run back options are all catching passes from Drew Lock?
Yeah, very interesting game here. It's nice to see that it's at a 50-point total. I guess my favorite play here would be Julio Jones at 7,200. I really don't understand this price point for Julio Jones, somebody that's been looking fantastic as of late. Ever since week 6, 36 points, week 7, 17, week 8, he had 23 points as well. He's looking fantastic. I think he's way too cheap here, and he's something I definitely like. I just don't like stacking him with Matt Ryan. I don't really love that stack. There's other quarterbacks I like, but on the Denver side, I think it's kind of interesting. I really like attacking this Atlanta defense through the air. I mean, they have one of the worst pass defenses in the league. And Drew Lock, it's not the prettiest play in the world, but he is 5,200, very, very cheap. Decent stackable options. Jerry Jeudy, somebody I'm looking at, 4,700, very cheap. Noah Fant, 4,600, who I really like. So I think a Drew Lock stack with Jerry Jeudy, Fant running it back with Julio is something I'm looking at. It's really hard to trust Drew Lock, though. He's not the best quarterback in the world, but even Fant as like a one-off option. I mean, 4,600 for the guy, averaging 12.2 points. I really like him here. 9 targets last week, 7 the week before, getting a bunch of targets. I really don't understand this price point for a guy like Noah Fant, and you're giving me Atlanta defense. So that's something I really like there. But yeah, it should be a fun game here. And like I said, I like attacking this Atlanta defense all day.
Yeah, I agree. The Atlanta matchup is great. My only concern is that, like you said, it's not that you don't know this, man. Drew Lock, maybe not the best quarterback. So for that reason, I think this is a game that I'm mostly looking to run like secondary stacks of. But I do think that doesn't preclude me from playing some of the Denver weapons. I think you touched on my favorite one, Noah Fant, who's top 10 in targets, top 6 in target share, top 8 in there, I guess number 8, top 8, same thing in air yards, and top 10 in air yard share. Not only because this team is actually passing, 38 times a game. That's actually kind of surprising. I guess maybe because they're not, winning a ton of games. It doesn't make it easy to play ball control and good defense. So if they're going to be passing at a decent enough clip, and Noah Fant's going to have pretty high market share numbers, he's totally fine. I can get over in one game the fact that I don't like Drew Lock enough to play some Noah Fant, who's my favorite option here. And I like running him back with Julio, as you said. It's just a low price for a non-Calvin Ridley. Assumedly, I don't think Calvin Ridley's technically been ruled out yet, but the injury did look like it would end up being like at least a 1+ week injury. So it doesn't look like he's playing this week unless he has been ruled out, but I don't think that's happened yet. So Sans, Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, alpha receiver, running back with Noah Fant. I think it's easy to stack. I'm not sure how much of primary stacking I would be doing in this game because of the presence of Drew Lock, which is always a dampener on the overall points that should be scored in a game, but it's not enough of a awful play that I think you can't play any of them. Like, we'll talk about Dallas in a bit. That does dip into you can't play any of these guys' territory. So we'll talk about that in a bit, but before we get there, man, Seattle versus Buffalo. This is the one. This is the game that everyone is looking at. It is a 55-point total. Has come up 2 points since opening. It opened at 53, which was already high, and they said, no, not enough. Now we have a 2.5-point favorite, Seattle. What do you make of this game? I think it's the game. I get it. It's the game. You want to play all the plays in this game. However, everyone else wants to play all of the plays in this game, and for that reason, I'm not really sure what my ownership looks like. I think the most exposure I get to this game is the cheaper quarterback play, which is Josh Allen, and the cheaper stacking options, which is Stephon Diggs, cheaper than DK Metcalf at least, and the actual ancillary pieces who do get involved, Cole Beasley and John Brown, are affordable. Whereas, good luck trying to pick a David Moore touchdown game. Is it possible? Sure. But are his odds of scoring that touchdown good? No. And even if he scores, does that guarantee he has a good game? Not if it's a 2 for 25 and touchdown line. That doesn't even guarantee that he ends up being in the optimal lineup. So because this game is so incredibly expensive, it does need to hit not only that 55 points, it might need to hit a total of 60 points or more to pay off all of the stacking salaries. And that still doesn't even include that you really can't play a ton of other good plays. I think the only way to get around that is by double stacking Josh Allen with, obviously Stephon Diggs and Allen are costly, but Cole Beasley and John Brown are not, and they are involved sporadically, enough that it is more than a consideration than a guy like David Morris. So how do you approach this game where it's the nuts, but it is also the most expensive and precludes you from playing a lot of other good plays on the slate?
Yeah, you said it. I mean, this is a game I really like to target, but this is a game everybody's going to want to target here. And I'm kind of curious about the ownership and what it's going to be like for a guy like Josh Allen, somebody that started off the year hot. Like, people were giving him MVP talks earlier in the year. And ever since then, he hasn't been looking all that great. 12 points against New England, 20 against the Jets, only 16 against Kansas City there. And I did it last week. I played Jimmy Garoppolo against the Seattle defense. I'm going right back to it. I'm playing Josh Allen against Seattle here. Obviously, I'm a much better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo, but Allen has been in a slump. This is definitely a game to come out of that slump. Could be a huge bounce back game here against Seattle that has given up the most points to QBs so far this year. And Allen has that rushing yard upside, multiple touchdown upside. And it seems like, a lot of Seattle games, it seems like a lot of them always some way end up in the Billy Maker in some type of way. Like DK Metcalf last week is somebody I was really high on. And I just like the run back options as well. The Allen stack with Diggs is somebody I really like at 7,400. Cole Beasley is a nice cheap option, 5,400. And the run back options, of course, there's pretty much two of them that I like. DK Metcalf, 7,800. But I'm really interested in Tyler Lockett, Buffalo, who does struggle against the slot there. And you're getting a $1,000 savings off of a DK Metcalf. Lockett, 7 touchdowns on the year, 575 yards. He still has a ton of upside. It's just really hard to pick between a Metcalf or a Lockett. But if you're giving me 1,000 savings, I do like that stack and run back option there. But hopefully it's not too owned. Hopefully, Allen doing not so great as of late. Take some ownership off of Allen. But I have a feeling this game is going to be extremely high owned.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we are just in too sharp of an era of DFS where you don't slide these kinds of games by people. So for that reason, I think this game is kind of a soft fade for me outside of my weird Josh Allen stacks, which is really the only way. I think when I'm building my lineups, I'm going to set a rule of Josh Allen must be played with 2 players, which isn't always the case. I think there are scenarios in which you can play Josh Allen with Stephon Diggs, and if he runs one in, he doesn't need to throw 3 touchdowns to get in the optimal lineup. He can throw 2, and one of them go to Stephon Diggs, or both of them go to Stephon Diggs. So in this game, though, when I think if you're targeting this game, you need to get unique by doing it, I think I probably am going to look to get probably John Brown, but he essentially is kind of splitting the secondary role with Cole Beasley. So I think probably some of both of those will be in my lineups, and that's the only way I approach this game, simply because of the ownership and the price. Not only is it going to be popular, but if it was for some reason, it was a game where there was a 55-point total and every play was cheap, I would much more consider how I want to approach this game, because at that point, it doesn't take a lot for these players to pay off and be in, the 3, 4, 5x their salary range. But they need so many points. The path to failing is simple. This game scores a lot of points, and it is just not enough. whereas the next game has a very similar total. It's 52. It's a field goal less, but 52 points is still a lot of points. It's the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Las Vegas Raiders. And these teams have some affordable options. You've got like Mike Williams around 5K, Keenan Allen getting up there in price, but he's still not in that DK Metcalf tier, and he's the most expensive play in this entire game, I believe. I mean, at least the flex plays. What do you make of this game? And because it is so much cheaper, it's probably still going to be popular, maybe not quite as popular, but in that same range. But do you give it some sort of credence because it is, close to as popular, but so much cheaper?
Yeah, I kind of have some interest. I mean, I'm a big Herbert fan. The dude's a beast. I have him on my fantasy team actually, so he's been doing very good, averaging 27 DraftKings points. The dude's looking really good. I mean, he looks fantastic out there. And Keenan Allen, they did price him up a little bit. They priced him up $800 here, $7,000. I still like Keenan Allen in cash. I'm probably not going to go there in tournaments. I think he's going to be decently high owned still. And there are other options I like in that range, like a Julio or a Stephon Diggs. So I'm not going to have much Allen in tournaments, but I still think he's fine in cash. He's going to get a ton of targets. Somebody I really like is Justin Jackson, 4,900. I think the dude's way too cheap. He had 20 touches last week. He didn't have much touches in week 7 and only had like 10 touches then, but the week before that, he had 20 touches as well. So, kind of interesting there to see how they're going to use him against a pretty solid matchup here and against the Raiders. And other than that, Hunter Henry here, 4,000. I think is way too cheap. Getting a decent amount of targets is just 1 touchdown on the year, 4 targets in weeks 8, 7 targets in week 7, 8 targets in week 5. So all the targets are there. The touchdown are not there yet. Could this be the game? I think it could. So I don't know. I'm curious to hear what the Herbert ownership will be come Sunday, because I'm kind of thinking maybe a Herbert Allen and a Henry stack and running it back with like the run back options are tough. Maybe a Josh Jacobs 6,300 cheap, but yeah, the run back options are not great in this game. I don't think. Maybe a Waller.
Yeah, the run back options, Josh Jacobs, not like extensively used in the passing game, had got some work early in the season, but I don't think he's their primary pass catching back, at least how they want to use him, unfortunately. So he kind of in a scenario where the Herbert stacks go off is probably on the losing side of the game, and then therefore is not awfully viable. Darren Waller, incredibly popular, but deserves to be so. I believe number 1 in target share among tight ends, number 2 in targets. Those are quite impressive numbers and makes sense as a run back. I'll throw out Henry Ruggs. Only I think 4 targets last week, 3 before that. But last week ran a route on, I believe it was like around about 90% of the Derek Carr dropbacks, and he's been on the field for 78% of the snaps in each of the past 2 weeks. He's out there. He's running routes. There are routes that maybe Derek Carr isn't the most adept at hitting, but if there is a chance, and there is a chance that on his 4, 5, or 6 even targets that he breaks 2 long ones, which is what we saw when they played Kansas City, that puts him in the optimal lineup. It makes him a great run back option. My only other thought in this game is that probably see high ownership on Herbert. Right now I'm looking at him as top 5 owned. Keenan Allen, earlier in the day, I saw him as the number 1 owned receiver. Should shuffle in at worst in the mix there, because I still think like he's playing like he looks like Michael Thomas out there. He literally has 12.8 targets per game in the games he's played and finished with Justin Herbert. He's averaging like 9.4 catches for like upwards of over 90 yards. It is very similar production to what Michael Thomas is doing on a limited sample, but it's the best we have to work with. He looks incredible. I think he should be closer to Devontae Adams in price than anything else. Devontae Adams on the main slate, but we saw him at like 8,800. I think he should be an 8K player. And I think the ownership recognizes that too. I don't know if he comes in at number 1 by the end of the week. Probably comes in top 5 though. Hunter Henry is like the only good mid-range tight end, really. He's fairly affordable given how much volume he's seeing. Also going to be popular. I love the Justin Jackson call. Every touchdown my Justin Jackson lineup score is a touchdown. All of these chalk Keenan Allen, these chalk Hunter Henry, these chalk Justin Herbert lineups are not scoring. And he's getting the bulk of the work. 37 carries over the past 3 weeks is more than any other of the running backs. We saw like Joshua Kelly essentially got like not benched, but he basically got mixed in and out of the lineup for Troy Maine Pope. Like I don't think they really care too much about using Joshua Kelly if that's how they're going to, quote, use him. And we've also seen 5 or more targets, I believe, in each of the past 3 games for Justin Jackson. Like he's a sort of a 3-down back. They play at a high pace and they run a lot. So that makes up for him not seeing the like vast majority, not seeing 70 to 80% of the team's carries, because you don't need that crazy of a market share when you play fast and you run a lot. So I think he's incredible leverage. And even if his teammates weren't going to be popular, he's still a decent enough speculative play at 4,900. So I'm going to be filthily overweight on Justin Jackson's week. It's going to be an exciting one watching this game at 4:00. The next game we have, it's a game that is, boy, is it ugly. I talked about it earlier. I might have mentioned Ben DiNucci. He's actually not playing as far as I know. I think it'll be Cooper Rush or the other guy. I don't care who it is. When you're on your fourth string quarterback, your offense deserves to have a 14-point implied team total. They're also 14-point underdogs. The game has maybe the lowest total on the slate if I can find. I see no numbers. Oh, it is in line right now with Washington versus the Giants, and that's about how much interest I have in it. It's not an interesting game to me at all because I don't really see many universes in which Dallas really does much on offense. James Conner is kind of the obvious play. He's under 7K. He's getting the bulk of the work both as a pass catcher, which is interesting. He gets a decent amount of work there, but as a rusher, he's seeing a ton of work. So James Conner in the ultimate game script versus maybe the worst defense in the league makes a ton of sense. He's probably going to be popular, and that's chalk that I'd maybe be okay with eating. Outside of that, can you sell me on any other part of this game?
No, I cannot. This game is going to be very ugly. They even priced up the Steelers defense to 4,900. I mean, I'm not playing them, but rightfully so. I mean, I don't see Dallas doing anything in this game at all. The only thing I'm interested in on the Pittsburgh side is James Conner. You mentioned him, 6,900. I think is a really good play, especially with the game script. They're going to be running the ball a ton, which helps Conner a lot. And even then, I guess the Pittsburgh wide receivers are interesting, but Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, it's really hard to pick which one's going to go off, especially with Deontay Johnson. The dude's made out of glass. I mean, has there been a game where he hasn't been injured? Just very frustrating there, but probably I'll stay away from the Pittsburgh wide receivers. It's such a good matchup, though. It's very intriguing, but I do think they're going to pound the ball with James Conner. I can see him getting a ton of carries. So James Conner, for me, I think 6,900 is a really good play there.
Yeah, that's all I've got. And this Deontay Johnson thing, he gets so many targets when he's healthy, and he is never seemingly healthy. Last week, he wasn't out long. He missed a drive or two, but it's also possible that he technically did come back in and just wasn't, fully himself and healthy. So it's hard to make of exactly what's been wrong with him. And I know in the Tennessee game, which he had like 14 or so targets, also missed the final drive or two. The first 2 weeks, I believe he had like nearly 20. It was 24 targets, I believe, in 2 games. When he's on the field and playing, he seemingly is the number one receiver. I may go back to him this week because that volume when healthy, which seems exceedingly rare at this point, is so voluminous. But outside of that, yeah, this is a game that you can play James Conner, but it's difficult to correlate him, and I like to build essentially as much correlation as possible into my lineups. So I may have some one-off James Conner, but that's probably it. This Dallas team. Poor Dallas. Rip. Arizona versus Miami. Let's move away. It's depressing thinking about Dallas for too long. It'll get in your head. Arizona, 4.5-point favorites versus Miami. It's a 48.5-point total. It's on the rise by a point since opening. And this game seemingly, I think, will kind of go under the radar. It doesn't have an insane total, but it's a reasonable total. We've got at least one quarterback that is one of the best fantasy quarterbacks of the slate and of the season in Kyler Murray. And the stacking option is so incredibly obvious. Maybe the best receiver of the season, at least in contention, in DeAndre Hopkins. How do you feel about this game? Not the crazy 52-point totals, but it has at least a quarterback that should be incredibly exciting on essentially every week.
Yeah, I think this game might go a little bit under-owned. And Kyler Murray's definitely an interesting option. The dude's pretty good, averaging nearly 30 DraftKings points per game. He has that rushing yard upside. He has that rushing touchdown upside that we really like. And I think it's a great stackable option here with DeAndre Hopkins, 8,200 if you can go up there and pay for it. It's just the run back options for Miami, not great at all. They're missing Myles Gaskin, I believe, for the next couple of weeks. So that's going to open up stuff. Matt Breida, he's 4,000. He is questionable. They said he wasn't at practice today, but I'm assuming he's going to play at 4,000. I think it's a pretty good pump play there if he does get the start, which I am assuming. So that's definitely something to look at there. And like I said, I think Murray might go a little bit under-owned this week. So it's something I'm looking at. Chase Edmonds, 6,800. Wish he was priced down a little bit, but I definitely understand the play against this Miami defense, a game that they probably should be winning here. And other than that, I guess I'm interested in the Cardinals defense at 2,900 against this Miami team that benched my dude Fitzmagic and also is missing a Myles Gaskin. I think the Cardinals can do fine as a defensive play there.
Yeah, I guess before we should talk about the running backs. The pass catching options, I mean, it's DeAndre Hopkins. If you're double stacking, it's Kirk, and that seems like it's about it. On the other side, they've mixed around a lot, but it seems like if you're going to target one player, it's Devontae Parker. Mike Gesicki like ceding work to Durham Smythe, and Adam Shaheen, I believe. I just can't do it with him not because I think not because I think he's bad, not because I just don't like that he's burned me. I don't like that he's not seeing the requisite amount of volume that I need from a tight end. So because of that, there are like better cheap plays that I'd go to at tight end. The running backs, we talked a little bit about Breida. I think at 4K, he's really interesting. He's projecting to be only like modestly chalky. He's not getting up. I don't see him above 20% right now. So I think you can certainly go to him. Maybe not the best spot as an underdog, but he's also like a pretty avid pass catcher. So I do think he has a lot of potential upside. I'm not sure what their split looks like. Jordan Howard has been inactive for most of the past few weeks. Clearly have no interest in getting him involved if he's not even going to join the team. They traded for DeAndre Washington, but on a short week coming into the team as of Tuesday, I believe. I guess his first practice is probably Wednesday. Don't know how much we see of him. It seems like maybe he gives up a little bit of pass catching work to Patrick Laird, but it could be a lot of Breida. So I like that. Let's close on this. We talked about every game. Chase Edmonds could be the smash of all smashes, but he got priced up. DraftKings and FanDuel had a chance to actually change the price because they were on bye last week. No word yet on if Kenyon Drake will play. I don't believe he's practiced yet. It doesn't look likely, so it's somewhat safe to assume Kenyon Drake won't play. If he doesn't play, what do we do with Chase Edmonds?
I mean, I don't know. I think he's in a really good spot. It's just I like a lot of the options better. I like Dalvin Cook more, Derrick Henry more. I like James Robinson more, Connor more. Like he's down on my list. I still think he's a great play and all, but do you think he's going to be high owned?
I don't have him projected as fairly high owned, probably for the reasons you're saying. James Robinson is getting a ton of work and scoring a lot of touchdowns. He had 6 touchdowns, like you said. James Conner is in the smash spot of all smash spots, and people want to pay up for their Dalvin Cooks. They want to pay up for these guys. So no, I actually don't think he ends up being very popular, and that's the only reason I really care about playing, because this isn't a game environment. Like, yes, they're favorites, but also Kyler Murray does so much with his legs that it is concerning that he could take away potential touchdowns and just yardage overall. So that concerns me a bit. But it doesn't concern me to the point that if we see him coming in as fairly low owned, which does appear to be the case, I'm probably going to have some of him simply because of his ownership. I think he has crazy 3, like just playing every single snap. He has like 3 down, every down upside. Their other backup is, Benjamin, who isn't even been active yet. I do think we see a lot of Chase Edmonds. He's also a great pass catcher, and he's been used in that role before even the Kenyon Drake injury. So I think there's so much upside there. Is it more or less upside than James Robinson, than James Conner? I don't think it's any more or less, but he's going to be lesser owned than all of those guys. So I think for that reason, I probably do have to get myself into a serious amount of Chase Edmonds relative to the field, but it's simply a tournament strategy play. I don't think he's that much different than James Conner. I think people are going to jam in James Conner, which isn't bad, but at the similar price, the similar upside point, I'm going to lean Edmonds here.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, the ownership, if he's lower owned, I'll definitely have him, but I do like the other guys a little bit better. But, what you're saying definitely makes sense. If he's like half the ownership of a James Conner or a James Robinson, he does have a ton of upside. I think he's going to have a great game.
All right. And just like, with any of these good plays, if no one plays the good plays, you play the good plays. If people are playing the good plays, maybe you play some not quite as good plays. And on that note, we will get out of here. For myself on Twitter at Kyle Tweets here, for Brady at DFS_numbers. We'll catch you guys next week, and you can catch Brady Sunday. What time are you on Sunday morning?
9 o'clock Eastern time. No, 10 o'clock Eastern time. My bad.
10 o'clock Eastern time. Hopefully we'll have some updates on these kind of ever-changing landscapes of your Kenyon Drakes, your Matt Staffords, all these things. So for myself, for Brady, we'll see you guys next week.